Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Taking Stock. It's another live episode right here from Kalila Reynolds Media Studios. I feel so important saying that. I feel like Oprah, Harper Studios broadcasting live from the Magnificent Mile. But it's great to be live with you this evening. We have a wonderful lineup planned for you. A lot of stuff going on. Many of you have been saying that you like this live format, so we've decided to do this for the next month, or at least until the lockdown measures are eased, because this just makes things easier for us and for our team. And you guys said that you like it too. I really like the interaction, being able to talk with all of you, to get your feedback directly during the show. So remember, we're bringing you all of the latest business news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. And also remember to head over to my website, KalilaReynolds.com/newsletter, once this live has ended, or even now, because you can multitask, right? And you can get my newsletter straight to your inbox. Also, starting Sunday, my guide to choosing a stockbroker is now out. The first edition went out on Sunday in the newsletter. And as of now, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you get that as a free bonus gift, as a free guide. So you get your free copy once you subscribe at KalilaReynolds.com/newsletter. Now, come on, let's get this money.
Here's what's hot, brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart. Barita Investments has responded to a series of articles in the Trinidad Express, raising questions about its relationship with Barita Finance and Cornerstone Investments. Cornerstone is Barita's largest shareholder and has just purchased another 15 million shares in August to bring its shareholding to 75%. According to the Express, 12 million of those shares were sold by Barita Finance. The Trinidadian newspaper reports that dozens of financial executives in Jamaica are concerned to find out who is behind Barita Finance. The articles also question Barita's rapid ascension in the past 3 years. What extraordinary feat of financial genius transformed an investment worth $22 million in 2018 to one worth $492 million just 3 years later, the writer asks. Additionally, questions were raised about where Cornerstone got the money to invest over $200 million to maintain their 74% stake in Barita during the IPO. The article also claims that Barita Finance borrowed large sums of money from Barita Investments to lend to Cornerstone. In a lengthy response sent to Kalila Reynolds Media, Barita Investments outlined that they are the investment manager for Barita Finance. Barita Investments noted that Barita Finance is a special purpose vehicle whose shareholdings and directorship are independent of and external to Barita Investments, the cornerstone entities, and any of its directors. According to Barita, this is a common feature for investment banks in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and the world. Responding to concerns about Cornerstone's funding, Barita stated that the shareholders of Cornerstone include some of the owners and operators of some of the largest businesses in Jamaica, including Mark Myers from Restaurants of Jamaica Limited, Duncan Stewart from Stewart's Auto Sales, Nigel Chen C. from National Supply Company, Hugh Core from Fesco, and Philip Lee from Labels and Boxes. Barita said these shareholders, coupled with banking partners, have supported the growth of the business and funded Cornerstone with over $160 million. They attribute the company's rapid growth to the launch of its investment banking unit in December 2018, as well as growth in its asset management business and other areas. The first supplementary budget for this fiscal year is expected to be tabled in Parliament by the end of the month. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark said the government is formulating the numbers through which it will address critical needs of the country that have emerged since approval of this year's budget. That includes requirements for the health sector. Revisions to the budget come against the overperformance of tax collections between April and July. Dr. Clark says the government has a surplus of $26.4 billion for the period. Fiscal surplus is the difference between the government's earnings and spending. Dr. Clark says contributing factors included actual revenues exceeding budgeted revenues by $17.3 billion. Additionally, the government spent $7.3 billion less than budgeted. However, he says the underspending at a point in time doesn't mean the government is actually saving anything, because the spending may be delayed. NCB has started charging customers each time they use their Visa debit card to make a purchase outside of Jamaica. This applies whether shopping online or when visiting another country. The foreign transaction fee took effect September 4 and covers cross-border processing and foreign currency conversion charges. It now costs $438.78 Jamaican, almost $3 US, to make a withdrawal at an international ABM. Shopping online or in apps will attract a transaction conversion fee of 2.25% plus GCT on the total transaction cost. That works out to be about $1 for every $40 spent. NCB says the charges will be listed on a customer's bank statement or as a separate line item in recent transactions on the NCB mobile app or on the NCB online banking portal. Online learning company Edufocal is inching closer to its initial public offering. Sources indicated that the company is expected to submit its draft prospectus to regulators very soon. KRM understands that Edufocal will be seeking to raise somewhere in the range of 150 to 200 million Jamaican dollars, or about 1 to 1.3 million US dollars for 20% of the company. Edufocal also signed with Mayberry Investments as lead broker and arranger last week. Early this year, Mayberry became a minority shareholder in Edufocal with a 13% stake in the company. The partnership was sealed through a private equity arrangement. However, the amount paid was not disclosed. Over in the United States, PayPal is reportedly exploring launching its own stock trading platform for its U.S. customers. The online payment operator has reportedly hired brokerage industry veteran Rich Hagan as part of the move. Hagan was the co-founder of online brokerage TradeKing, which was bought by Ali Invest. According to CNBC, sources close to the matter say PayPal will cooperate with a brokerage or purchase a broker-dealer. They also say the firm is in talks with potential partners. However, the trading service is not likely to be rolled out this year. The move comes amid a retail trading boom that reportedly brought over 10 million new individual investors into the U.S. stock market in the first 6 months of 2021. Jamaica Producers Group has acquired a 50% stake in First Juice producer Co-Beverage Lab based in Barcelona, Spain. The transaction took effect September 1. JP is now the largest shareholder of CBL, which serves customers in Southern Europe. JP CEO Jeffrey Hall said the acquisition is directly in line with the group's strategic plan, which includes the development of major new markets in Europe for fresh juice. He added that CBL's team and facilities will benefit JP's larger established footprint and overall expertise in fresh juice. What's Hot was brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart.
Hey moneymakers, you're not an official part of the family until you have your merch. Visit KalilaReynolds.com/store to order your t-shirt and your mask today. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock is brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency. Insurance made easy. All right, welcome back, everybody. Glad to see so many people on. Hi, 46 of you joining me so far. I know you take some time before, people start joining and getting into the groove. Hi, Ingrid. Hi, David Gray, Lisa Donaldson, Brad Brown, Kai Bernard. I want to shout out everybody who is joining us early on in the program. It's so great to have you. I think we're starting to get the hang of this live show thing, and I kind of like it. Reminds me of my radio days when we used to do live all the time. I'm seeing that we have 2 logos up though, so we need to sort that out. Okay, let me take off one. There we go. Now we have just 1 logo up, mine and Bulwark's logo. So big up Bulwark Insurance Agency. They've been with us from day one on this program. Well, today we have an interesting one for you. We've got a clapback edition, right? A couple weeks ago on this program, I was able to interview the founder and CEO of eCurrency. He's a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Dharmapalan. The company is based in California, and I met him for the first time at the BOJ's minting ceremony. It's quote unquote minting because it's not physical currency, so it wouldn't be minted. There's another word that they use for it in that world. But they had a minting ceremony for the first 230 million Jamaican dollars of Jamaica's digital currency. And I was able to meet with him and see some of the other principals of that company. And so during that interview, Jonathan told me that blockchain technology would not be used as the security mechanism for, or to develop, I should say, Jamaica's central bank digital currency. And since then, a group called Caribbean Blockchain Alliance has, clapped back at that, basically saying that is absolutely false in a post on LinkedIn. And so we have today with us Stefen Deleveaux from the Caribbean Blockchain Alliance, who's going to give his perspective. Hi, Stefen. Glad to have you.
Hey, Kalila. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we tried to make contact with Jonathan from eCurrency as well to have him on this program, because it would have been good to have both sides simultaneously. I'm no expert in blockchain and cryptocurrency and CBDC, so I'm not the right person, but I can moderate a discussion. We weren't able to make contact with Jonathan in time to have him on this program, but I do want to hear your perspective, Stefen. So first of all, before we even get into what John said, explain for just the regular lay person. And I am one of these people. Like I said, I'm no expert in digital currency, in blockchain, all this tech stuff. Explain to us, what is blockchain? How does it work?
I will make sure to keep this as non-technical as possible.
Please.
But blockchain is essentially, blockchain is really just digital infrastructure that a lot of people are using now for so many different things. In the same way that, the internet was created to do all these things that we mainly use for communication all over the world, the blockchain is kind of the next level of internet infrastructure, where you're not only transacting information, not only broadcasting information, you're also broadcasting value. So, which is why, we've seen Bitcoin and all these things that have started to come in over the last, decade plus, in terms of money and how people are using it to transact value. So blockchain is kind of the infrastructure that all these things sit on top of. And obviously it's not just for cryptocurrencies. People are also using it for supply chain management, auditing, all kind of different things. So this is a technology that's being used for so many things and can really bring the Caribbean in general into the next level of internet infrastructure, which is why the Caribbean Blockchain Alliance exists. We're a nonprofit. We're trying to push the adoption of blockchain technology and usage throughout the Caribbean, not specific to any particular country. This is fully regional, and we have no bias or leanings toward any particular company either. We're a full community of 180 plus people that have interacted with the space for a long time. Blockchain experts, cybersecurity experts, regulators, a few people in some of the various governments. So we're a full community, and we wanted to really, I guess, speak up just to make sure that things weren't being misinterpreted, and that we had a chance to really talk to everyday people to make sure they understand what's happening.
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned some of your members. So you're not affiliated with any company, you said. To my viewers, though, and people who are watching, people who may be listening, if you guys have a specific question, please ask it in the live chat or in the comments. I will be able to see it and pose it to Stefen, and also later on to the analysts, because like I said, this tech is not my space. It's not my forte. I know a little bit about it, just enough to get by. But if you guys have any specific questions, pose them in the chat so that I can ask Stefen. So Stefen, isn't it the case that a blockchain is an open technology, meaning anybody can use it? So explain that to me.
Yeah, so, and this is that's a very important point for this use case. So we're talking about central bank digital currencies. And a lot of institutions, such as central banks, such as various kinds of banks throughout the world, are already using blockchain. And they're basically two different kinds of. We can categorize them as two different kinds, not to get complicated. But there's the fully open kind, like Bitcoin, where literally anyone in the world could use it. And there are, a bit more private versions where, if you're a bank or if you're a central bank or if you're just one organization or even just a small conglomerate of multiple organizations, you can use this kind of blockchain technology in a way where it's not open to everybody in the world. So you have a bit more control over, exactly. You have a bit more control over who can use it, who is able to even see what goes on, etc. But of course, you're still having the benefit of blockchain, which is basically that it has that extra security, it has that extra traceability, it has that auditability that's inherent in all blockchain systems.
So I think that's part of where the concern, at least for me, came in, because as far as I understood, it was an open mechanism. Anybody could go in and use it. But let's come to Jonathan's specific comment when I asked him about blockchain being used. This is what he said. Understand that you're actually not using blockchain technology? Why is that?
Oh, absolutely not. Blockchain technology has some very interesting features, but it is quite rudimentary. It uses a relatively vulnerable security mechanism for cryptography. It is necessary but not sufficient. What we believe needs to happen is multiple layers of security have to be applied simultaneously to make sure that the three forms of security are met: the personal security of the individuals, the security of the instrument itself, and national security of the Jamaican currency in circulation. So those cannot be achieved by just using a relatively simple blockchain technology. Blockchain technology can be used to enable transactions using the central bank digital currency that's produced by the Bank of Jamaica.
All right, so he said a couple of things there, Stefen. I hope we haven't lost him. Looks like his internet connection is giving trouble. But a couple of things there to note. He said blockchain technology, he described it as using a vulnerable security mechanism for cryptography, which he said is necessary but not sufficient. Let's hope we get Stefen back sometime soon. And then the other point that he made is that, like I said, necessary but not sufficient. He says that blockchain can be used for transactions, to enable the transactions that the CBDC would be used for, CBDC being Jamaica's digital currency, but that it wouldn't be used to create the actual currency. So I wonder if I can think of a good analogy here. So I think you guys get it. You guys are smart, are smart people. So the blockchain technology would not be used to create the digital currency, but it could be used to enable the transactions once the currency is created. That was the point that Jonathan was making. And so Stefen and the rest of the CBA, Stefen, you were able to see the bite that was played just now?
It cut off at the end, but I do remember enough from what was
All
said.
right. So I'd like you to respond to that.
Sure, and those comments were actually what pushed us to write that post in the first place, just to try to make things clear. Because as expected with newer technologies, there's a lot of misinterpretation, maybe lack of clarity, things like that. So we just wanted to make sure to speak up and make sure our side was heard. Now, I think there are a few important factors here. One being the idea of blockchains being rudimentary and vulnerable in terms of security. That is, as we said in the post, frankly untrue. And we can actually see this in real time, because for those who have been following, the Bahamas launched their central bank digital currency that is blockchain based, that actually uses blockchain technology, and it's actually set up in a way where it's not, as was said, rudimentary. It has different layers to it. There are different ways to interact with it, etc.
Stick a pin there,
it's
Stefen.
customizable.
Stick a pin, Stefen.
Sure.
So was blockchain used to actually create the Bahamas digital currency, as opposed to enabling the transactions, as what Jonathan said?
No, it's blockchain based. They minted it with blockchain.
Okay.
I think that's what he was. Yeah, exactly. And the same with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which of course represents an entire union of countries that is also using blockchain technology. And to add to that, to show how important this is, Nigeria actually just announced that they're using, again, blockchain for central bank digital currency. And they're also using a Caribbean firm to mint their currency. So we are
Right. Bit
currently
won that contract,
exporting.
and Bit is the same. Bit is the same company
Exactly.
that's doing the Eastern Caribbean's
Eastern
one.
Caribbean.
Yep.
Exactly. So now we see we're exporting our skills and knowledge from the Caribbean to other very large countries, obviously, because Nigeria is not a small fry in any sense of the word. So we see that we have this community full of people who are building this infrastructure in the right way, and we just generally think it's very important that all of our countries do the same, because this is a matter of national security as well. If you have a centralized infrastructure and centralized infrastructures get hacked all the time, and you're basing your entire monetary base off of it, anything that goes wrong could potentially go wrong, and we obviously would not want to see that happen, and we would not want, the Jamaican people to be affected. So we think it's extremely important that, and I don't know what's possible at this stage, but it's very important that everyone knows that blockchain is the superior infrastructure to use for these kind of platforms,
So you think
as
it
we're
would be
seeing it being
better?
used all over the world.
What's China using for their digital currency?
Well, China's using something that would be hard to replicate, but that's also has some level of blockchain infrastructure in it. But we don't want to follow China too closely, because they're going a little extra in terms of what they're doing.
Well, I ask about China because that's 1.3 billion people, and talking about mass use and making sure that it's secure. I'm sure that's high on their radar too. Yeah, so that's what Jonathan from eCurrency said. Let me see if we have some questions here from our viewers. Markland says, if eCurrency does not use blockchain in BOJ CBDC, it is not safe. And that's basically what you've been saying, Stefen. So you think blockchain, but eCurrency in that interview didn't actually explain what technology they're going to be using to develop the CBDC. So how do you know, or perhaps you're aware from another source, what technology they're going to be using? How do you know that blockchain is superior to them if you don't know what they're using?
So that's a great question. So it kind of comes down to, and this is also after looking more into their services and whatnot, but it really comes down to, and I don't want to make it binary, but it's basically blockchain or not blockchain at the end of the day, or decentralized ledger technology and not decentralized ledger technology, meaning that if this technology is coming from your company in a very centralized way, and you're not using this kind of decentralized digital ledger, then you kind of remove all these important security aspects. Now, it may still have some level of like verifiability, but it wouldn't have it to the level that blockchain allows for.
So Brian Bailey, one of our viewers, says China is using RTGS, which is similar to what Jamaica is using for RCBDC, what eCurrency would be using.
Right.
So what's the difference with RTGS now on blockchain?
That's true.
No, I'm asking
so
you, what's the
RTGS
difference?
is actually, yeah, so RTGS is actually closer to what we already have in financial infrastructure. That's what a lot of banks have been using, for example, for a long time. That's kind of, it's related to SWIFT, and it's related to other, long-standing financial infrastructures, which is, not to say they are inherently bad. It's just, if you compare them to systems that have greater security. And to another point that I just remembered, he did mention, I think he said that outright, that his infrastructure was more secure than Bitcoin. Now, if you single out the Bitcoin, if you single out the Bitcoin blockchain as a whole, not even talking about the entire industry, just Bitcoin,
He singled
It's
out Bitcoin
almost,
because I specifically asked him about Bitcoin. I asked him if it's more secure
gotcha.
than right.
Right. And that was something that really caught us all off edge, because the Bitcoin blockchain, and no exaggeration, it is the most robust and most secure piece of digital infrastructure that we have. We meaning, the world. It carries about, at this point, a trillion dollars worth of value, and it's basically unhackable. Think of a pot with $1 trillion worth of money in it, and it's just sitting there, right? Of course, literally everybody who has the capability to will try to hack it, will try to break into it, and the fact that that has not happened just shows the security and the robustness of it. So comparing anything to that is frankly a complete misrepresentation, in our opinion.
So you guys came out very strong in that LinkedIn post. You said avoiding blockchain for such an important project will open up risk variables and potential attack vectors. This could be devastating to the entire Jamaican monetary base if a serious issue were to arise down the line, especially as cybercrime increases globally. Devastating, Stefen? A bit of hyperbole there, or are you serious?
So, so when you're thinking of, for example, cybersecurity, yeah, and we could kind of stay on that point. When you think of cybersecurity, you have to think of the worst case scenarios at all times. You have to build for the worst case scenarios at all times. Now, especially, if this is a country's infrastructure, sorry, this is a company's infrastructure, and if it's a small company, that's one thing. If it's an entire country's monetary base, that's another. That means that you cannot have anything go wrong at any time, because if you do, that could raise serious issues, and that could disrupt the lives of potentially everybody in the country. So that's why we had to take such a hard stance, because the possibility for negative effects is definitely there, and if there are any negative effects, it would be pretty far-reaching.
And then you went on, Stefen, your association, to strongly urge the Jamaican leadership to rethink the current methodology of their CBDC project. And you said, we urge them to listen to the experts in the region, which I imagine is you and your group, rather than outsiders, you said, who may not have their best interests in mind, I suppose, because eCurrency is based in California. So why so strong on that point?
Yeah, I mean, so, and again, this isn't to say outright that they are doing anything predatory or negative, but as Caribbean people, we are very well used to, outsiders doing that to us, outsiders with, foreign companies coming in and pushing forward when there are perfectly, strong, brilliant Caribbean people who can do the same thing. And then two, we understand as Caribbean people our issues and our needs and what's necessary. So that's something that
but it's a globalized
I think
world,
everyone
Stephen.
is.
Anybody can win any contract anywhere. Hence, BIT has the contract in Nigeria. Couldn't Nigerians say the same thing, that we don't want these Caribbean people coming in, give the job to a Nigerian? Nigerians understand our concept better, our economy better.
That is very fair. But I would also say that there is that factor. But when you are, when you are more sure about again, going back to the robustness and the security, if you know that your people have something that, and again, it doesn't even necessarily have to be about Caribbean versus non-Caribbean. That's just another factor. But if you're going back to the idea of centralized systems, that are less robust, are less secure, hypothetically at the very least, you do have to push back. You do have to make sure that people are not being told the wrong thing, that they're not being fooled in any kind of way, as it potentially happens to everyone, or potentially can
Here's a
happen to anyone.
comment. Marlon says, eCurrency, why reinvent the wheel? Blockchain has been around way before your company's inception. And then Brian was explaining more about the RTGS, and he's responding to a comment from Kai saying China's CBDC is mobile phone first, utilizes mobile data rails, RTGS, allowing for more government control. Because Kai was asking whether it's the same RTGS that's used in online bank transfers, real-time gross settlement. That's what we're talking about? I'm asking you.
Yeah,
Is that what we're talking?
Brian made an excellent point about. Yeah, sorry, I think we have a bit of a lag, but Brian made a great point about how China's system also allows for more governmental control, which is why I said we don't necessarily want to go their route, because you don't want to. First of all, even China could be using the worst system in the world, and if you go after them to try to hack them, that won't end pretty. So it's very different for them compared to what we can manage, what we can go through. So it's important for us as small countries, as countries that are more vulnerable to the elements in alt form, we have to make sure that we're using the strongest and most robust systems at all times.
Innovative Stitch says China is the world leading cyber sprinter. And then here is a question. I think this is a good general question, Stefen. Blockchains are ever evolving. This wasn't a question, but this is a good comment too. Bitcoin is first generation proof of work, Ethereum second generation using smart contracts proof of work, and now third generation proof of stake smart contracts is coming up. That wasn't the one I wanted to respond to though. This was a question: how beneficial is this going to be for the region, or people just doing this because they feel like they're gonna miss out on something?
Yeah, so in terms of, if we're talking about blockchain usage in general, especially for central bank digital currencies, it's extremely important and extremely useful for the region, because the systems that we use right now are not up to date in any real way. I mean, even in terms of just transactions and trade, we're caught up with the banks, we're caught up with Western Union. If I want to do a bank transfer to Jamaica, I have to send my money to New York for it to come down to Jamaica, which adds time, which adds money. Now, if we have chain-based systems where we can build currencies tied to the national currency in all of our countries, that just makes it so much easier. And again, so much more secure. It kind of really opens up. I'll give you an example. So in the Bahamas, where we already have a central bank digital currency, we are made up of obviously a number of different islands, and some of our less populated islands, they don't really have banking access, which means for them to do any kind of real monetary transaction, they have to either, go on a boat, go on a plane, come to Nassau, which is the capital, and basically try to do all their payments, all their banking, etc. that way. Now with the central bank digital currency, it's fully digital, meaning pull out their phone, bring the central bank digital currency and make their payment from wherever they are. It doesn't matter what island they are. Now for the entire Caribbean, that is boom, because we have unbanked populations and underbanked populations everywhere. So this is for them first, to make sure that they have access and they have this kind of composable money where they can basically do what they need to do without it necessarily being physical.
Are you involved with the Bahamas digital currency or any other digital currency being developed, Stefen?
No, not directly. So we're not with any particular service provider.
Okay, just had to make that clear, because some people might say you have an interest and you need to defend that interest in whatever, what is shaping up, blockchain versus the RTGS technology and whatever else may be developed and be out there. But thank you so much for your input, Stefen. I hope to be able to get a response from eCurrency sometime in the week, and let's see what comes out of this.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so up next, let me read this one last comment. Let's remember, at least in respect to eCurrency, El Salvador just passed a bill recognizing Bitcoin as legal national tender. El Salvador is its own special case. We spoke about that on Taking Stock a few weeks ago. But yeah, the point is, I think overall point that you're making is that Bitcoin and digital currencies are getting more accepted. Markland says the only thing that's more secure than blockchain is a decentralized blockchain. Okay. All right. Thank you again, Stefen. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back with the market recap and the analysts. They're standing by.
Thank you.
Segment of Taking Stock was brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency. Insurance made easy.
Time now for your market recap, brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments. The Jamaica Stock Exchange declined, with the combined index losing nearly 1%. 109 stocks traded across both the main and the junior markets of the JSE for the week ending Friday, September 3, 2021. 38 advanced, 59 declined, and 12 stayed the same. 117 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, totaling $1.3 billion. And after a stellar rise in August, Fesco stock was last week's biggest loser, back down 35%. It opened this week at $2.05. Wicked and Wind Farm ordinary shares traded the second highest, with people buying and selling nearly 17 million shares in the company. The stock lost 5 cents to open at 56 cents. Just like Fesco, RJR stock is also down after nearly doubling in August. RJR's stock price fell 26% last week to become the second biggest loser. It opened Monday at $3.20. And Radio Jamaica rounded out the most traded, taking up 9% of market volume. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. Pulse Investments stock price rose nearly 19% to close last week at $3.89. JMMB Group 7.25% VRJMDCR preference share gained 20 cents to open this week at $1.50. Rounding out our biggest gains was Kingston Properties, which gained $1.25 to open this week at $10.25. On the losing side now, rounding off the biggest losers was Paramount Trading Jamaica, which lost nearly 13% to close last week at 96 cents. Market recap was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers. Your best interest at heart. All right, let's welcome our panel. I think we're starting to get the hang of this live thing. I actually think I prefer live. It reminds me of my radio days. I think I prefer live than doing it pre-recorded, but this is pretty cool. So let's welcome our panel of analysts. This evening, we have with us David Rose. He's a business writer at The Observer, investment research and sovereign risk analyst at JMMP, Leovanni Dillon, and financial coach, founder, and CEO of Profit Jumpstarter, Keisha Bailey. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kalila.
And a song bright and chirpy for 8:30 at night. So this is my bedtime. I'm normally, tired by now, but the vibes have me up.
Yeah.
You guys are night people?
Somewhat.
Yeah. Not really, but for this show, yeah.
Oh, you do it for me. Oh, how sweet. Nice. All right, so let's get right into it. We have a lot of topics to go through this evening. And the first one was a question posed by one of our viewers. They wanted us to tackle this. And it's the issue of the BOJ interest rate, because the Bank of Jamaica has signaled that they are likely to raise interest rates at their next decision, which I think is it the end of this month? At the end of September, end of October. It's coming up soon.
September.
And so one of our viewers wanted us to ask, what are the implications of that for investors? If the BOJ does raise its policy rate, which in turn means that regular banks are going to likely raise their interest rates as well, what are the implications for investors? So Keisha, let me start with you. What does that mean for investors, and how should we treat our portfolio, if anything at all?
Right. Okay. So from an investment education perspective, because still ultimately persons need to contact their financial advisors to get
Right.
specific information for them. All right, so when we think about potential increases in interest rate, the main thing the Bank of Jamaica would want to be doing is to combat inflation. The BOJ would be thinking, yes, interest rates are increase. We need to raise interest rates because the prices of goods and services are going up too much. What happens then is that all companies that are sensitive to higher interest rates would be ones that you would want to be on the lookout for, because those companies may get hit. When we think about it, the main thing from an investment perspective, companies that benefit from high interest rates are ones that you're going to want to go towards then. So which types of companies benefit from a high interest rate environment? Typically banks, your real estate, because that's giving you what people call a hedge against inflation. It protects you there. What you don't want to be doing definitely is looking at your savings account, because that would be taking a bigger hit in a high interest rate environment, because savings rates are much lower, which we all know. So things you want to look out for, you want to take advantage of the sectors that benefit from high interest rates, your real estate, your financials, and stay away from sectors that are impacted by high interest rates. So those who are importing, because their input costs are now high, you want to stay away from those companies typically.
Leo, what's your take on that?
All right. So by raising interest rates, right, it's likely to have a net negative impact. The idea, of course, behind raising interest rates would be as a method to try and control inflation. So I'm talking about the textbook here. This is how you do it in the textbook, right? However, though, in a Jamaican economy as it is now, especially coming out of the pandemic, and there's a lot of slack in the economy in terms of like underemployment, persons not really employed back to the levels before the whole COVID thing. Then what that means is that there's a lot of extra supply that's in the market that can absorb the shock, right? The next key thing though is that even the BOJ admits that they expect that the inflation is transitory, meaning that it's temporary, and a lot of it is coming from, if you look in the global sphere, I think you had spoken about this several weeks ago about even shipping costs going up, because of the containers and all of that, and then you have some other issues with, some commodity prices spiking, because what happened is that when you had the lockdown, there was a sudden decline in demand, so a lot of persons shut down, including like chip manufacturers, lumber people, a lot of like industry at large shut down. Then soon after, there's like a quick turn on of everything. So it created this massive spike in demand. However, the supply is not really there yet. So for example, even something as simple as PlayStation, for example, PlayStation 5s, and persons can't get them because the chip manufacturers can't make them fast enough because of the speed up. That doesn't mean that, so for example, in the next year or so, or maybe even sooner, you're able to catch up with that, the supply catch up, and then you can easily see that inflation kind of abate. So that means from that perspective, one would question now, is this really the time to raise rates because of the reason for the inflation? So if the inflation was really coming from an overheating economy, then you could make an easier case for it. For in the case of even globally right now, in the case of Jamaica in particular, most of the inflation seems to be transitory. So that's the reason why there's some kind of pushback there in terms of like how persons and the private sector are viewing it.
Okay. So the question from the viewer though is, if they do make that decision to raise the interest rates, what should they do in terms of managing their portfolio?
All right. So there's different strategies that you can apply, right? So if, for example, you're talking about a bond portfolio, you could look to invest in a lot more variable rate notes. If you're talking about, that's one strategy. So of course your rate would change depending on what's happening. Of course, when the BOJ raise their rates, your rates would reset on your instrument. Another one is that you could apply a ladder strategy. What you do with that now is like you invest in equal, you split up your investment that each one of them mature about roughly the same. So for example, if you have a $10 million bond portfolio, you'd invest $1 million to expire in 1 year, 1 million to expire in 2 years, and so forth out of 10. So then as soon as one mature now, you'd reinvest that one again now for 10 years. So that way, if interest rates shift, you have some of your portfolio will become due and you can reinvest that at a higher rate. So that's another way. And then the next thing is that you can just invest in shorter duration bonds, meaning bonds that mature at a shorter time. When it comes to stocks now, it gets a lot more tricky because the challenge with some companies are less sensitive. So, for example, companies with low debt burden or so would be less sensitive to an increase in rates, and companies that have more consumer staples like food would be less susceptible to issues from that. Then, of course, you have some cyclical businesses that could be more impacted by it in terms of raising rates going up, impacting demand for their products and services. So if you think, for example, easy one, for example, is that if you look at like JetCon, for argument's sake, that sells cars, persons will take loans to get those cars. If rates go up, it makes it that much more expensive. So yeah, so there's a ripple effect on that side, and it's kind of like a case by case thing in terms of which companies you want to look at and which you want to avoid in the equities market.
Kalila, you're muted, Kalila.
My bad. We're live. Sorry.
Yes.
I was saying thanks for that comprehensive response, Leo. Multiple different strategies that people could take there. Just to remind you all that this is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Leo is at JMMB, but he's not your personal advisor. This is just general advice. So book a session with one of them if you want personal advice about your own portfolio. So we have some other things to go through, but I like this question from one of our viewers. And here's the question. It says, how do APOs affect a stock's price? Do the APO stocks adopt the market price after the offer closes? David, can you take that one?
Well, that's a very wide question because we've only had call it 3 APOs to be honest. Sorry, 4 APOs to be honest, really and truly. It's a kind of a new phenomenon in a sense because you had JMB having the first APO, then you had Barita, then you had Proven, Signals, and Dermon. Sorry, so it's 5. And the thing is, it depends on what conditions are stipulated in the actual prospectus. So, for example, Dermon said that if you wanted to become a shareholder in their pool, then you had until January 6th. To optic as far as we're like, want to get at least a share, whatever, or start buying below a particular price, So, and then you had the case of, let us say, a GMB, whereby after this was allocated, the price ran up. But the thing with that is it was pre-COVID. What you've seen in recent times is that the companies, have seen their stock price kind of trade relatively below the general public price. For shareholders and reserve persons in those pools, they're fine. They're usually still up on their investment, but otherwise, an APO can negatively impact the stock price based on the increase of supply for the general public. Because when you think about it, if you have more shares in the market, which is greater supply, but you do have much demand, then the price can kind of stagnate unless the company boasts some significant results, which will encourage other investors to really take in a position.
Well, let's see how that theory holds up with Barita's current APO, because it is their third time raising a significant amount of money. And I was thinking about the same thing. Is the fourth APO for Barita?
No, rights issue 1 in January 2019.
Oh, rights issue. Okay. Yeah, if you count the rights issue.
This is second APO they've done.
Right. All right. So let's go into, since we're speaking about capital raises, let's look at the IPO scene now, Keisha. 2 local manufacturing companies we're hearing about, Jamaica Fibreglass Products and Spur Spices, are coming to the equities markets probably around next month to raise funds. We also reported earlier in the program that Edufocal is making moves towards that end as well. So what are these companies looking like, Keisha?
All right, so first up, Jamaica Fibreglass. They're looking to raise around 300 million in its IPO. Then Spur Spices, which makes seasoning and sauces locally and overseas, they're also looking to raise a similar amount. Both of the deals are being brokered by GK Capital, so that's going to be exciting to see how that plays out. The main thing is that the pipeline on the IPO front appears to be very healthy, even though it was slowed down somewhat by COVID. There's still a lot of companies slowly working their way through. So it's likely to pick up in the coming months in terms of what we'll see. But for now, Jamaica Fibreglass and Spur Spices around 300 million each.
Each. Okay, so both looking to list on the junior market of the stock exchange, and Edufocal, I understand, will be looking for between 150 and 200 million dollars. That one being led by Mayberry. So you guys keep your pockets open. You always complain that you hear about these things too late, and then the smaller IPOs open and close same day, and you don't get an opportunity. So here we are, notifying you in advance that these ones are coming up, so that you can prepare for them and start researching on these companies as well. All right, next up, Wisynco's financial performance is out. I like this company. Ever since their IPO 2017 or 18?
December.
2017 December. Yep. So Leo, give me the highlights from Wisynco's latest financial results.
Yeah, so if you look on the full year numbers, revenue was down marginally, about 1%. Profit was up about 10%. Revenue was like about 32 billion, 31.8, and profits was about 3.1 billion. These are actually the highest numbers you're seeing for the company. And of course,
Wow.
That's kind of good, given that we're coming out, of course, and we're still in it still, in our pandemic. So that was good. The Q4 in particular was brilliant. So profit was up 85% to 860 million. That's the highest Q4 numbers for them. Well, since listing, definitely. So there's no higher number than that. And then, of course, on the revenue side, 8.2 billion, 16% increase. Again, that was a record number for the Q4s. So
what was driving those increases, Leo?
All right, so they just indicated that it just seems like they're saying that demand. Demand for their products is back up. Because of course you had less lockdowns and restrictions in that period, so that was what they contributed to. Which of course is part of it, but again, it's still record numbers, so that means there's just some good organic growth happening there. And on the profit side, though, one of the major reasons for that growth and profitability is that they really contain costs. So if you look on the admin expense, that really came in about, I think they shaved about 500 million off it for the year, which is a decent number. So of course that helped profitability in terms of being up for them, despite revenue, like in the full year numbers being marginally down. So that was a good year for them. If you look at it year to date, Wisynco is down about 7%. That compares to the market, which is up about 4%. So marginally trailing the market like that. When you look on the response to the results, it came out a little while back now. The response kind of seems muted, and I think part of that might be due to the multiples. So currently the PE on Wisynco trading PE is about 19 times. If you look at the average PE for Wisynco since listing, it's about 21 times. So it's kind of close to that longer term average for them. So I think there's just a general person that really, it's a decent number, little growth, but at the same time, the valuation on it, at least compared to the historical levels, isn't that great in terms of cheap to really get people excited. So I think that's what's really happening with it, because if you look at the activity since the results, it's basically been flat. But I think it's a good company to look at, though. It gives a good picture of what's happening in the economy too. Well, not it alone, but taking the market as a whole. But because it's a huge company, again, generating about $32 billion in revenue, that of course most of that revenue is generated in Jamaica, over 30 billion of it. So so because of that, it kind of gives you a good idea of what's happening on the broader context of the economy. So it's one to keep your eyes on.
All right, so we have two good questions from our viewers. Tiffany wants you to explain why the stock price is stagnant for Wisynco, and then Xavier heard you mention something about trailing PE, and she wants to know what is PE. Well, let's start with the first one about the stock price.
Yeah, so I think I've touched on it a little bit, but part of it is if you look in the market dynamics, though, you can see that there's a decent amount of stock on sale at around $16 in the market, about a couple million, million units, on sale. Now, to give you a perspective of what that means, on average over the last year, Wisynco trades about 206,000 units a day. So you can understand that volume is a little bit heavy. So a person seeing that might back off and not be as aggressive in purchasing because they see those supplies on the market. And I don't know what which I touched on before now is that it's trading about 19 times on a trading PE basis. I so explain now what that means, right? And because of that now, close to the average over since it's been listed around 21 times, then it's not really that cheap if you look on it. So what would really get person exciting, for example, if the earnings number, for example, was big enough that it drove the PE down to like 15, maybe 14 times, then it would kind of become more attractive and become more of a, persons would probably start looking at it more as a thing that they need to add to their portfolio, increase their stake. But at this ratio, it seems basically fairly priced, not really nothing to write home about. Now, the second question about what that is. So what you're really looking at here is a way of measuring the value of companies. Now, again, there's no one metric, no one ratio. That's the golden ratio that's going to tell you what to buy and what to sell. There's a whole lot of other things you need to look at. But it does give you a good idea of value though. So what it really is telling you is that how much money am I paying to earn $1 of earnings from this company, to get access to $1 of earnings. So if a PE, for example, is 10 times, now what it's saying, I need to pay $10, I'm going to pay $10, and then this company now is going to give me $1 in earning in return for that. Right? If it's 15 or 20, then you're paying $20. Now, as you can see from that, that means the lower the better. So if, for example, just for a moment, this is not how it works, but just to simplify it, if you consider earnings that a company makes as paying everything out to that investor, right? So a company makes $1 in earnings, it pays everything to the investor. It doesn't work like this because of other reasons, but just to simplify it. Then clearly you want to pay as little as possible to get that $1 of earnings. So in an ideal world, you'd want to pay $1 and get $1 of earnings. Then that would mean that in essentially 1 year you get your payback, and then the next year you get another $1. But you remember you only paid $1 for it, and then you would be getting a lot of return on that. That's not how it works in the real world though. Real world, you'd probably see like 10 times earnings. So that means is that you're paying $10, you get $1 in earning, and then at that rate would take you 10 years to get back your money. Right? So what you want is that number to be as low as possible to give you an idea of value. Right? That's not, again, not the only metric you look at, but that's one way of looking at it. It's an oversimplified example, but just to bring home the point of lower, the better. Right? Yeah.
So Xavier, I hope that answers your question, because there are, and I saw that there are many people in the chat who are responding to you as well. But just to let everyone know, there is no stupid question. If you don't understand, just ask the question. Don't feel dumb. Other people are here to help you out. The analysts are here to help you out. I'm here to guide the conversation. And this is how we all learn. All right, so the last topic we're going to be looking at this evening is Cygnus Credit Investments Limited. They're projected to hit $100 million in investments by the end of this year. And because they've been putting that APO money to work. So David, give me the highlights from that one.
So Cygnus Credit Investments Limited is a private credit provider, meaning that, they lend money to companies like forms, so, converting with preference shares, commodity purchase agreements, numerous things. So Cygnus, creates investment profit from about $50 million, about $82 million at the end of June 2021. And the Cygnus originally said that it's December 2020 AGM that, hey, we're looking to grow our portfolio to $100 million within the next 2 to 3 years. But surprise, APO went up with a great. And on top of that, they've got a great pipeline of debt available to them through both bonds and so on, which has allowed for them to now say, hey, it's looking like we're going to hit the target much earlier than expected. So what is this number? So for those who don't know, Cygnus is operating in the Caribbean. And the thing is, in the Caribbean, not all of our companies are what you'd call investment grade. So what is investment grade? So it's something called debt ratings, and if you should be above, you're considered investment grade. And what that means is that you're basically have a greater pool of access to money to you, basically. So some countries or even funds can't invest in debt or options or financial instruments in the Caribbean because of just our rating in the Caribbean. So Cygnus said, hey, once we get to this $100 million target, we're going to get to the debt rating, and then also actually access more capital, and even consider to expand further outside the region possibly. So it's a very good site. So profit went up 155% to $5 million, and total net investment income was about $6.9 million. And they were saying, hey, want to actually have $8 million in total investment income as well. So Cygnus is really having a spectacular year.
And they're putting that money to work, like I said. Keisha, let me get your take on Cygnus before we go.
Yeah, definitely a good strategy. I think it's a very solid company with their business model because they're coming at a time when the need is very high. Flexible capital financing is the thing, especially in a pandemic environment like now and being stretched to find resources. A lot of companies are struggling for support, and Signal stepping in with flexible financial arrangements is key. I do second the thought on going for that credit rating. It will open them up now on the international scale and really bring the company to our next level of growth, which I'm excited to see.
Okay, let me take this last question from our viewers. This person wants to know, is there any investment company in Jamaica that can give me a 1% return on investment daily? Is that ambitious? 1% daily, so that would be 30% in a month.
That's
365%. Yeah, that's
it's actually higher than that.
ambitious.
If you compound
It's
a lot higher than
it's
a lot higher than that. That's
that's
possible.
That's true.
I mean, we're not saying it's impossible, but it's not likely.
No.
And also it depends on the risk that you're willing to take too, because like if you're doing crypto, you can possibly get that, but at what risk? What risk are you comfortable with taking to get that type of return?
I mean, several stars would need to be aligned for that to happen.
Yeah, on a sustainable basis though. So that's possible, for example, for a month or maybe a year or two, but it's not possible for like 5-10 years.
As we have seen with Olint, Cash Plus.
Yes, and that was 10% a month. So that was a lot.
Anybody promising you that on a sustainable basis, I would question them. Seriously, I would. All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Kalila.
Don't go just yet. Well, the analysts, you guys can go, but I mean the viewers don't go. I'm going to take a couple more of your comments before we wrap the show. But first, let's just play this little jingle.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers.
Yeah, that's all it was. Just had to give our sponsor their credit. So let me read a couple more of the comments. We had a lot of good ones. Wisdom says, companies like JMB who have a heavyweight in GOJ instruments will benefit the most from the change in interest rates. Not just JMB, well, I guess you just gave that example because Leo was on. But many financial institutions have a lot invested in GOJ instruments, and that has been the case since time was time. Monkey chew banana, spit white life. The same person came back earlier and said, I would love to see a bank that will give me 22% return on investment per month. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But like I said, just make sure that you are aware of the risk that you are taking. I did a video just this morning about risk versus return. High risk, high reward, low risk, low reward. Because a lot of you are asking about the NCB bond and saying 6%, pick the money that, baby money that, 6% a year over 3 years, not going to give you a whole lot of money in return. Well, it depends on how much you're investing. Because if you put in $1 million, that's $180,000 in interest payments over the 3-year period, which is, I guess, decent. But if you're putting in the minimum $100,000 and you're getting back $18,000, it might not seem like such a big deal. But if you're investing a large amount, then that 6% definitely adds up. And it's all about diversifying your portfolio so that you have stuff that are higher risk balanced with stuff that are lower risk. So when the high risk stuff don't quite pan out, you have stuff that is low risk that can help to offset any losses that you may make. How many of you got my broker guide last week Sunday? If not Sunday, sometime in the week, if you subscribe to the newsletter, show your hands, raise your hands in the chat if you got it, and let me know what you thought about it. We put a lot of work into it. Some of you watching might have participated in the survey that we used to create the guide as well. So thank you so much for participating in that. Hi Girl says, I got it. Yay. I'm glad to hear that you got it. Lisa Donaldson says she got it too. Hey, Lisa, thank you so much. And well, what did you guys think about it? Was it useful to you? Let me know what improvements can be made. You can leave your comments in the chat. You can email me. You can message me on social media, DM me, whatever, because I think what we're going to do is create an updated version every year, because things might change between now and then. Who knows who will still be the most, who will be on top next year as opposed to this year. Things in the financial segment do change. So I think every year around this time, we're going to reissue that survey and then reissue an updated version. Plus, with any other feedback that you guys have, other things that you might want us to include or take a look at, we can also add that. So if you haven't gotten your copy yet, subscribe to my newsletter, KalilaReynolds.com/newsletter, and you will get a free copy of our Jamaican Broker's Guide, which can help you to decide which broker might be right for you. If you are just starting, it's very useful. If you already have one or multiple investment accounts, you get to see how your broker stacks up against others, such as who has the lowest fees, whose customers are the most satisfied, and so on and so forth. David says he missed it. So David, make sure you get it. Put up the link, he says, KalilaReynolds.com/newsletter. It's going to be in the description box right under this video, so you can get that. Well, thank you so much. Just to give you a heads up as to what else is coming up on the channel this week. If you haven't seen Money Mondays JA yet, we spend a lot of time learning how to secure the bag, right? But how many of us have actually checked to make sure that our bag is actually secure, especially since we do so much business online? That's the topic of Money Mondays JA. That episode is already up on the channel. Tomorrow night is Money Moves JA. We're looking at legal ways of handling conflicts that could otherwise have led to dismissal. And not just that, our guest, Colin Virgo, addresses bad mind in the workplace. So this was a very interesting chat that I had with Colin. Later this week, we'll also be catching up with the JMMB team at their SME Resource Center. They have a lot of resources, free resources for small businesses. And just a reminder for you to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kalila Ray. I'm on TikTok now. TikTok is a vibe, is doing quite well at Kalila Ray as well. Also follow at Taking Stock JA on Instagram. And if you want to connect with the analysts this week, Keisha, David, Leo, check the description box below. Their contact information is right there. And also visit my website, KalilaReynolds.com, for financial information you can use however you like it. Watch, listen, or read. Catch us in the Observer newspaper and catch us on Cool 97 FM on Wednesdays and Thursday mornings at 7:30 a.m. Now tell a friend about Taking Stock, because investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm Kalila Reynolds. Let's get this money.